We're going to kick things off. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. My name is Mike Scheckman, and I'm the Regional Vice President with Robert Half, overseeing our operations in British Columbia and our Manitoba regions. I'm thrilled really to be hosting today's event. It's been a long time coming. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the human-centric future of work, including how the workforce has shifted and what companies can do to make this a positive and a transformative time for organizations, particularly through their people. So before we begin today's discussion, I want to address a couple quick housekeeping items. Number one, we'll be recording today's webinar and it will be available for on-demand viewing. We will also send that link post-event and share with you all. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the discussion. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen and we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as possible. So it is now my pleasure to introduce my guest today, Steve Cadigan. So Steve is one of the foremost authorities on the future of work, a highly sought after talent advisor to many leaders and organizations right across the globe. He's worked in the HR executive for over 25 years, probably started when he was about 10. But he's worked for organizations such as Cisco, Electronic Arts, and finally Chief HR Officer for LinkedIn right before launching his own firm. So Steve took LinkedIn from a private organization of about 400 employees to 4,000 strong, and through a successful IPO, helping it set up to be the powerhouse it has become today. In August of 2021, so just a couple months back, Steve published a groundbreaking book on the future of work titled Workquake, which is right here, embracing the aftershocks of COVID-19 to create a better model of working. And even before its release, it hit #1 on Amazon's list of hot new releases, which reminds me I owe you a review, so I'll get on that. And welcome to the show, Steve.
Mike, it's so great to be here. Good to see you again, and thank you for having me.
No, it's awesome. So I'm gonna start off. Many years back, an old family friend told me to lean in, and he told me this. He said, "People don't remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel." And this actually brings me back as I was preparing for our chat. It's actually one of the fondest memories that I had when you actually hosted us and our leadership team in California back in 2014. I think it was around March, and you brought our tech team and you took us into your home, you fed us, you took us across Silicon Valley. We got to check out amazing cultures at LinkedIn. You took us to Dropbox. We went by Yelp, Square, Twitter, and you have that amazing innate ability to really humanize things. And I'm going to say a quick quote that you have from the book. The future of work is not about robots, AI, and automation. The future of work is about being human. So just something to leave you with.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I think, I'm probably as guilty as the next person in thinking about where we've been and where we're going, that I love using technology, and it's awful interesting and you can use it in very playful ways. But one of the things I wanted to try to do in writing this book was counter this narrative that we see in the media, that it's all about technology and the future is all about robots. And, we're going to do a digital transformation. Hopefully there's a job for you here when we're done with it. And that's fundamentally just unsatisfying, demotivating, uninspiring. And I think we need to have a different conversation. And I think you're right. I think we've lost a little bit of the plot because of our seduction with technology, that we've forgotten that the technology should be here to deliver a better quality of life for us, to build something more beautiful, something where we connect more and we can work together more. And, let's take one of the first technology, quote unquote, advancements in the world of work, email. How's that going for you, Mike? You loving the greater productivity you have with email? No, because you've got something that's making you behind all the time, and it doesn't feel like it's delivering on the promise, right? But I appreciate you saying that, and I remember that visit when you guys came down Thank you for leaving out the trampoline part of that experience, and you guys competing against my young boys on the trampoline for tricks. But yeah, it's great to reconnect again here.
Yeah, we lost that battle, but that's all right. That's all right. So let's dive into discussion. But before we do, let's kick off with a quick poll question, and we're gonna get the take from some of the audience. So you should have it on your screen. Are you seeing an increase in turnover within your organizations and across the general business community? Simple yes or no answer. We'll give it a couple of seconds for people to pick their answers. So what do we got? An astounding yes, 80%. Are you surprised?
I'm definitely not surprised. And maybe that 20% are people who work for themselves. We didn't clarify, you have more than one person in your organization, but
True.
But yeah, isn't that fascinating? Wall Street Journal headlines today in the United States, where I'm dialing in from, we had about 3% of the workforce quit their jobs in the month of August. Wow. 3% of the workforce. That's the largest number in any month since we've ever been measuring voluntary resignations in the United States. And it's not like, hey, boom times and everyone's, doing great, but there's so many things, and we can hopefully roll into some of that today. But yeah. It's not surprising. And we were talking off air, Mike. Later tonight, I'm giving a seminar to a bunch of leaders in the nonprofit sector. And I sort of held this belief that, hey, if you have a good mission and a vision and an impact on society and you're helping people change lives, you've got a greater likelihood of holding on to people longer, because the work really matters and it's really impactful. And guess what? When I was preparing to talk to them, I said, hey, what are the talent issues you're seeing? So we can't hire people. We can't keep people. I go, even there? They said, yeah, even here. And again, this is San Francisco Bay Area, and the cost of living here is just off the charts, unaffordable, and it's getting worse. And that contributes to people having to face new economic realities and changing their circumstances. But yeah, it's a phenomenon that I'm not surprised to hear that the audience is experiencing, because I'm seeing in every industry, every geography of the world right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So let's set the tone for this conversation as well, Steve. I think that every time I read it, I think it is a massive impact. But take a second to read the inside cover of your book. I want you to share that with the audience, and I think that it's gonna open up some eyes and open up a few discussion points for us.
Okay, great. We'll do a little story time here to get started.
Yeah,
so
there we go.
Even though I wrote it, I'm still going to get tongue-tied. So bear with me, people. Okay, the future has never been more uncertain for both employers and employees. They face the same profoundly unsettling dilemma. Neither knows what skills they need to develop for the future. Futurists and the media tell us that over 50% of the jobs today will soon be replaced by automation and artificial intelligence. Turnover is higher than it's ever been. The percentage of the workforce that is actively disengaged has never been higher. The shelf lives of certain skills are diminishing rapidly. And I'll put an insert there, particularly hard skills. The value of a hard skill that you can use in your career is shrinking very fast. Long-standing industries and industry leaders are being disrupted, the General Electrics of the world. These staggering changes are challenging our concepts of what a career really looks like today and how we should build organizations going forward. We are facing a workquake. It's time we change the conversation. It's time we talk about how being human has never been more critical, and how we have more agency in applying our talents than at any other time in history. We need to have a more real and honest conversation around how to build a better model of the future of work, one in which both employers and employees feel safe and energized. COVID-19 has presented us the ideal opportunity to tackle this important challenge. Workquake is an attempt to articulate a compelling vision for the future of work through a number of stories, case studies, and my own experiences.
Yeah, I don't know if I need to laugh, smile, cry, because there's so much in there to unpack, Steve. I think that we're gonna look back at this time of history, even generations to come, and be like, that was a major pivotal point for people's careers and lives as a whole. So it's
Right.
it's pretty interesting. But I want to kick it off by maybe saying, what made you or inspire you to actually tackle this subject and release a whole book about this?
There's a number of things, Mike, honestly, and I think I covered it a little bit in what I just read, which is I'm frustrated that the biggest narrative about the future of work is more about technology than it is about humans. And I feel like we're having the wrong conversation. I feel like we're uninspiring and we're really smothering the engagement that we allegedly want from our employees by making the future seem so pessimistic. I mean, even the term digital transformation, which we talked off air, most organizations are trying to leverage technology for competitive advantage. Of course, that's what you want to do. You want to be, faster. You want to be able to make more money. You want to achieve a business where your costs are lower. And the belief is the technology will help us realize that outcome. But what we're failing to have when we're going through these digital transformations, we're failing to start with a conversation that this is about making your job better. This is about helping you make a bigger impact, taking away the stuff that is probably rote and isn't really challenging or interesting for you, and it's time consuming. And so that's why we're doing it. But just the words digital transformation, I mean, think about that for a second. We've talked about this before. When you hear the words in your organization, we're going through a digital transformation, what do those words really, what are the images that those words inspire? Beautiful, safe, loving, sunsets, beaches, ocean. No. Digital transformation conjures up images of cold, lifeless, robots, steel, metal, inhuman. But that's the language we're using. And so, to your point, it is pretty easy right now to want to get into the fetal position and say, mommy, there's just too much going on. And both here's the thing, from an employee perspective, I want to tell you, employers are scared right now, especially in the hospitality industry. They are fundamentally scared. Retail, restaurants, hotels have never had to fight for talent before and never had to build cultures that really inspire to a significant degree because they had a captive market for talent. And now talent is voting and saying, And those are the sectors, by the way, where the most number of people have resigned in the month of August, particularly in North America. And so, what I'm trying to paint through Workquake is, let's just step back for a second, even before the pandemic, and recognize some very, very big trends were happening. People are not staying in their companies as long as they used to. And this is a global trend in the US in particular. And as you know, Mike, I worked in Vancouver for 4 years, and I'm on the board of 2 companies right now in British Columbia. And it's just near and dear to my heart what's going on up there and what's happening. But the challenges are ubiquitous. People are staying in firms less than they ever have. And particularly the younger demographic of 25 to 35 is only staying about 2.8 years as a median. That means half of that number is less. It's like, wait, you're leaving? We just finished your new hire orientation. Like, what do we do? What do we do wrong? And so what I'm trying to help people understand is this is not a millennial issue. This is not a new generation seeing the world of work differently. The whole landscape of opportunity just changed. Everyone can see to a greater extent than at any time in history, where I can go, what I can do, how they're paying, what their culture's like, what their leadership style's like, and so forth. We have more information to make more choices. But the rub and one of the challenges, and there's many reasons why we're seeing some of these, turnover up and engagement going down. But one of the big reasons is because we have more choice. And we have more choice, it's making us more aware of what we don't have when we do make a choice. So I go and I join Cisco, and then I'm talking to my friends, I'm looking online, and I'm seeing that Salesforce has got all these really cool things going on, cool projects, cool benefits, cool things, making a difference in the community. Boy, they've got a really great philanthropy agenda. oh man, we don't have that here. And I didn't see all that stuff before. And so the workforce is filled with so much information now. It's, I think, not always producing greater comfort. It's producing a little more anxiety. And then you throw a pandemic on top of that. And then you've got just a formula for all kinds of unexpected challenges, right? With the talent. I mean, and I know you see that at Robert Half. I was asking you off air, like, hey, what are you seeing? And you say, wow, Steve, it is really, we've never seen this before, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's, we went through '06, and that was an amazing, acceleration in our business. And then this is surpassing anything that we've ever seen before. But going back to a bit of the book itself, and maybe even more personal for yourself, you advise, as I alluded to, a lot of executives across the globe. What did you learn most about yourself through the pandemic, personally?
Oh gosh, I really undercalled the quality of the education my kids were getting because I had a front row seat in their classroom, and I wasn't sure. And some days my kids, I have 3 teenage boys here and I have 2 stepdaughters. And sometimes the kids would take off their headphones and the speaker would, project with the teacher. And I was like, whoa, I wanted to stop what I'm doing a few times and participate as a student. I'm a history major. My son was going, as a junior last year, was going through U.S. history. And I was like, whoa, this is great. Are you getting into it? And I really undercalled the quality that was getting. I think I learned about myself. I really missed the time with my family, and I didn't miss driving my kids all over the universe on every weekend. And I loved having my weekends free for a year. It was a beautiful thing. And that was more, I mean, as much as I really miss seeing my kids play sports. I really love the downtime, the quiet time. And so I think that was really healthy for my family, for my marriage, we really came together and also bonded with my parents, who were both in their own ways struggling with, immunocompromised settings that they were living in with lots of other elderly people. And, and I also learned, back to this technology thing, how many of you here had to try to explain to your 85-year-old parents how to use Zoom remotely, right? And then you realize it's not intuitive. So I the first few weeks, and I had to get closed caption service. I had to buy that for my father because he can't hear very well. And so I said, Dad, open up Zoom. Okay, now go to the lower left and there's a chevron there with the camera. You see it? He goes, no, I don't. I said, it's right there. How can you miss it? So he's in the Zoom browser window. He's not actually in the new window that Zoom opened up. So it's just not intuitive, right? And so you just realize, man, this technology is not easy to use. If I can't explain it to my dad, and so my kids, and this is a pretty cool thing when we think about with the future and being optimistic, kids do not expect the technology to work. They're expecting it's going to be an experiment where we'll figure it out. And I've got friends and I'm going to have to unplug, plug it in, restart, reload. My dad's like, hey, this stuff should work. Why isn't it working? Like, they built it wrong. And kids don't expect it to work perfectly, right? And so it's just a different mindset. And I think that made me appreciate the rub when going to thinking about the future of work. It has to go through technology and human connection at some point. And folks we're all arriving into it from different places. We've got your digital natives, the younger generation. Then you've got your digital immigrants, people like me, finished school, never touched the computer, right? And I purposely didn't want to learn how to type because I didn't want to be in the secretary typing pool. That's what people who type did. They were secretaries. And that's just like in my working lifetime. So I had to graduate from school, quickly buy a computer and teach myself how to type. I can type just fine now. I'm not a hunter and pecker. No, I can go with the best of them. But I don't like doing that. And I'm like, hurry up with the voice recognition so that we can get through it. But anyway, I think, that's one of the things that I learned during the pandemic. It's super interesting times,
It's interesting that everybody's journey has been so different. And I think that's almost the way we have to evolve in terms of even leading people, right? When you focus in your book on the employee side, I think you chatted a little bit about being more human, and you go about talking about soft skills and how that's been misnamed. And I think you transition that to power skills. We talk about the science and hard skills that's easier to learn in essence because you can almost test it, right? But the power skills are so much behavioral driven. So how do people develop that? Because you can't just innately, some of it is innately, some of it is like, hey, you have it, you don't. But I think both of us will agree that it takes time to actually go through some of this experience to actually get it.
That's right. That's right. And preceding that point, Mike, I want to say that the reason I wanted to call this out is to help give people a sense of comfort when thinking about like, what skills should I learn so that I have a more, vital future? What skills should I learn and build so that I have good career insurance and good career security, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a great question. And that's what I, as a parent, as a professional, as an advisor to, companies around the world, this is the number one question people are thinking about, right? And so what I'm trying to say is, do you agree that the proliferation of technology is just going to continue in the world of work? Yes, I do. Okay. Do you agree the skills needed for those are going to keep changing? Yes. Okay. So what's going to differentiate you from everyone else is your power skills. Is you can learn the hard stuff, which you mentioned is easier to learn than leadership, communication, empathy, understanding, building cultural environments where people can thrive. Like, this is not something that technology will replace. And I believe, and again, I'm biased because I'm a liberal arts major who studied history and I'm in human resources. So clearly I'm a very, biased witness here, but I believe, most organizations that I'm spending time with and most universities that I'm spending time with, I'm asking universities, what are businesses, organizations, and society asking your help in building for them to be successful when you graduate your students? And they're increasingly saying soft skills. The companies are saying, we'll teach the hard skills. We're not worried about that, but we need people who can communicate. We need people who can talk about hard stuff. We need people who can influence, people who can negotiate, people who can have conversations and debate. That's what we want you to do, right? And people who can float and navigate in different environments and be adaptable. So, so that's where I'm coming from, with that point where it's really important. We've always, of course, soft skills or power skills, well, however you term them, are really important. But if anyone is attending today and you're responsible for thinking through what skills and talents do we need tomorrow so that we ensure we're setting our company up for the greatest likelihood of being successful, I think we all have to agree, the more adaptable you are, the more likely you're going to be successful. And this is fundamentally frustrating for people when I share this with them on this particular dimension. One of the big reasons I wrote Workquake is because we have a broken model of work. How we design work, how we design work days, work weeks, how we build org structures and career paths was all built for a slower pace of business, for long development cycles, and it wasn't built for rapid new competition coming in the form of a unicorn from China, from the US, from Canada, from where, like, it wasn't built for that. We got to move quickly. The number one all-time selling book on leadership is something called Built to Last by Collins and Porras. Great book, the number one all-time selling book on leadership. But the point of that book was, here's how you build a 100-year company. And my counter to that was, if that book was written today, it would not be titled Built to Last. It would be titled Built to Win Right Now. Because when you're focused on surviving, you're not building to last. And I think particularly in the technology sector, particularly companies whose competitive advantage is technology, and increasingly software is eating the world. Whatever business you're in, let's take banking. Banking is now right here. This is what I don't know if any of you know what this is. This is a bank branch right here. And what do banks know about this? Not much. How is banks doing? Not so good. Do you want to be in an industry where Google, PayPal, Apple are coming after you? No, you don't, because they know this and you don't. And so that's a problem. So banks, what's your asset as a bank? How your consumers behave. Where is that asset? Oh, it's sitting in India because you outsourced it, because all the consulting firms told you to outsource your data to India because it's a cheaper labor. Sorry, but that was a bad choice, right? And so, that's what I'm talking about, how fast things are changing, these models of work. Oh yeah, we've got a 7-year career path. Who going to any company today believes any firm has a 7-year career path? Like, it's very rare. Like, let's say if you're in the medical profession, okay, that's different. If you're going to a company that's making rockets and putting people, in space, like William Shatner launched as we're this morning, I was watching it with my kids. I'm like, do you know that guy is 90 years old, oldest guy ever to go in space? I mean, okay, I don't want people changing jobs there. I don't want people moving around because lives are on the line. So I want to build more continuity. But, I think that's how I think about, softer skills, how I think about why we need to retool how we build organizations to account for so many new things. Like, people aren't going to stay. Does anyone believe next year, in 3, 4, 5 years? And I'm not happy to be sharing that information, but I'm not excited that people aren't staying. But the fact is they are, and there's nobody who really thinks that trend's going to change. So what I'm trying to say in Workquake, among many things, is let's build to expect people are going to leave. Let's not be surprised. Let's build a model of work so that we don't have single points of failure. If you're in an organization today and you're in the world of tech and it takes 6 months for you to train someone how to do a job, I think you've got a design of work problem. I think because you're going to train them for 6 months, they're going to do it for another year, and then they're out. And then you'll be like, what happened? Like, I thought you liked us. Like, we really invested in you. And I'm like, yeah, but I just saw over there that they're investing in other things. I want to go do that. And so we're going to need to change work if people aren't staying as long, to be able to get people up and running quickly, train them faster. That's some of how I think we need to rethink about, okay, if you do accept people are going to stay shorter, how do we optimize for that? And what I do, throughout the book, this, Mike, is I give examples of industries that have built to expect and actually even benefit when an employee leaves.
Yeah, no, it's good. Those are good points. Stephen, a good segue maybe to where you talked about in the book around the learning mindset. And I think you mentioned it's not about, again, what you're learning, but more about your ability to actually learn, right? And what do you mean and how it actually fits into the future work? How if people are hearing that for the first time, how do you kind of implement that, or how do you implement that mindset for people?
It has to start with, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, it's a little bit early for me to hit the liquor cabinet. This is really kind of, this is very unsettling. I'm with you. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. I still see organizations, particularly talent leaders, being measured by keep the turnover low, keep the engagement high. And I would suggest that maybe we need to look at different things. Maybe we need to look at, instead of interviewing based on selling a candidate on our journey as a company, here's where we're going, this is what we're about, this is our culture, vision, mission, values. I think we need to start with, hey, candidate, what's your journey? Where are you going? How do you see your future and what's important to you? And this is something that we experimented with great success at LinkedIn. And we were just getting slaughtered, Mike, by Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter. It was it still is a career candy store right down here. And I know those of you who are attending in Vancouver or any of the technology centers in Canada, you're seeing like, whoa, what is going on here? And so what we learned was when we started to turn the dime on how do we go through the recruiting process so people see this differently and we deliver on something, is first thing we had to say is, okay, what problem are we solving and does it really matter? And why does anyone want to work here? We had to answer those questions. And I would say, if you're struggling right now, the place to start is, why does anyone want to work here? Because if you only have, we're nice, we pay people well, we have a good culture, we're going to make a lot of money, we have a lot of good investors, guess what? Everyone says that. Everyone says that. So what's unique about you? And who's the right person for you to be able to engage and hopefully get to stay as long as you think is reasonable? And that's a great place to start. But where we finally wound up solving this problem, because we were just having our, and we were terrified, Mike, when we were building LinkedIn, like, man, if the market knows we do not know how to recruit and our product is recruiting, we're really screwed. And that's why I have lots of gray hair now, because that was my job. And I had the board, I had the condensation on my neck from the CEO, the executive team, the board of directors, like, hey, you better figure this out. And we found that, you know, when we got clear on who we were, and we got clear on, let's make the journey of being here so valuable that it takes people wherever they're going, and not be focused on trying to keep people here, but trying to get people where they want to go, they started to accept more and stay longer. So we would say the first question, hey, when you leave LinkedIn, where do you want to be? And people like, what? We're talking about my exit when I haven't even been offered a job yet. Like, it was fundamentally, it threw them off their game, but it showed us like, hey, and this is what I meant when I said, let's have real, honest conversations. Is one of the experiences I talk about in my introduction is when I resigned from Electronic Arts to take the first chief people officer at LinkedIn, my boss, I'd only been there like 18 months, and my boss took a hit like, oh, he's leaving before he should. And I was like made to feel kind of bad, but I'm like, why? Like, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Electronic Arts, you cannot offer me a pre-IPO first-time head of human resources on a company that had a reasonable prospect of doing really well. It turned out it was amazing. But we were playing a game. The game is, you promised to stay here a long time. I promised to keep you employed here a long time. We both know that we can't really adhere to that promise, but let's pretend that you're going to stay a long time and we're going to keep you employed a long time. Instead of saying, you know what? We know this isn't probably not your destination, but let's make the time you're here as impactful and awesome as possible for both of us. You give me your best, we give you your best, and we know that's going to end. It's got a shorter shelf life than at any time that we've been doing about it, but let's make the best of it. And here's the other thing that not a lot of companies just are missing. Most companies are built to, I care about you only when you're here. When you leave, I don't care about you anymore. I only care about you when you're here. So here's where that falls apart. And this is where, like, I really, really want to shake the tree for those of you who are really, you go, okay, I've worked in a place like that, or maybe I even work for a place like that. And I know companies that have a no rehire policy still, but let's follow the trail of facts. People are leaving faster today than any time in history. Therefore, you have more alumni than at any point in history. That is a pool of opportunity you're just letting fall on the floor if you're not communicating to them. In an era where people are leaving more, why don't you curate that, nurture it? So few companies have an alumni strategy. It's almost like, you broke up with me, I don't even want to talk to you anymore. Yeah, but it's an open world. Everyone has more choice, and they're taking advantage of that. And they should, for their friends and their family, to build a better life for themselves. Like, why wouldn't they do that? You know, and how dare you think you're the right place for someone for the entirety of their professional life? Like, that's just faulty logic, right? And so that's part of, you know, you really got me going now, Mike. It's a little bit early, but you got me going in terms of, you know, we've got to rethink this thing. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying, like, your question was, so how do you start thinking about this? I think you start by saying, do we agree that all these facts that Steve's saying, turnover is probably going to continue to get higher, and you know, maybe we're not really talking about, we need to shift from being the destination employer to be a transition employer. Like, we're just going to be part of someone's journey, and we got to get to, if you agree with those, that's the first place I'd start. Do you buy that? Because if you don't, then anything you do is not going to make any sense anyway. And I know what's going to happen right now. And we're probably going to have in the chat, Steve, that sounds great. My leaders are never going to buy into this. My leaders won't. It sounds good. It makes sense. Well, so my answer to that is, well, invite me in and I will break the glass for you. And you can say, wow, that's, what do you think of what Steve said? He's kind of a little bit crazy, but there's a lot of truth to that, right? And what's happening is human nature is playing out, which is, I'm a business leader and I'm not comfortable with change. I know as a business, I can deliver when everyone's in the office and when we're focused on long-term engagement and retention. I know how to work that world. Yeah. I don't know how to build a world of work where I'm going to accept people are leaving. And it's really hard. But if you're not filling recs right now and jobs are staying open longer than you want them to, doing the same thing is a little bit of the definition of insanity, right? Like, I think that we got to look for different solutions here.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of heat you're throwing our way, but no, there's a lot of really good points, a lot of good points in there. I want to shift things to, I think we discussed a little bit about how employee value has also shifted. And Robert Half actually has done a recent research and survey where 27% of professionals had a shift in perspective due to the pandemic and prefer to work for an organization that better aligns with their personal values. And interestingly enough, and even more of an impact, 75% of employees would actually leave a company whose values don't align with their own with that shift. So in your experience with the pandemic, how has that psychology changed in the workplace? How has that shifted for everybody?
Oh gosh, I think it's probably been a clearer shift for employees than it has for employers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here's what's happened, and I'll tell a story that may resonate for some folks and on how I see the pandemic reshaping how people are thinking about work. And then, we can talk a little bit around some interesting things that employers are doing to try to address the new psychology of the workforce. When we were experiencing turnover at LinkedIn years ago, we were just devastated. Anyone left, oh my gosh, it's so hard to recruit. And when someone left, it was so painful. So we did a lot of analysis. And one time, one of my team members compared data of who's leaving to benefit data, such as revealing something really interesting. First-time parents were leaving at a much greater rate than other employee categories or groups, right? We looked at, length of time, what's your background, what department you're in, all kinds of things. We realized, hey, there's a pretty interesting thing here that we'd never identified before, because HR systems are usually not that great and they're not already putting data like that together. And there's all kinds of privacy information. Not every employee had their child on our benefit plan, so we're not always seeing when there's a new child in the family. And so we thought about that, like, oh man, do we not have good benefits for our first time parents? Do we not have good time off? Do we not have good support? What can we do? And after looking at this for a while, we sort of came to a conclusion, like, no, we're doing everything that other organizations are doing. In fact, we're going a little above in some areas. Maybe there's something out of our control. And that's kind of where we landed. First-time parents, and those of you that have kids will recognize this, which is when you have your first child, your view of your life shifts radically. Where you want to be, how you want to spend your time, and who you want to be with takes a big shift. I feel, in a way, Mike, not like we all gave birth to our first child, but I feel like the pandemic is a similar moment in time. Mm-hmm. We stopped doing life the way we did it. And of course, we're going to see new things. Things slowed down. We're not spending as much time, most of us, commuting. We're not spending time in interruptions during the workday or bumping into people. We're just a little more stationary, and we're seeing things we didn't see before. And we're coming up with different thoughts and different priorities that matter to us now, that when we were just running on the gerbil on the treadmill life, that we weren't seeing. And so I feel like, that's where we're at right now. Now, do I feel like we've hit a stable point on that? No, I don't. I think it's still shifting. And I think we're not in the clear with this pandemic. The ground is still soft. And here we are. And I understand why it's happening. I wish it were different, but here's where we are. We're about 19 months into the pandemic as of today. And I feel just now, most leaders are finally saying, okay, I guess we're not going back to the way we was. Just now. So a year and a half. They've been waiting on big decisions, on big investments, on maybe new product strategies or new investments in real estate or buildings that they're thinking of growing. And they're holding out lots of decisions, hoping more certainty around what's happening with the pandemic and what that means. Because think about it. Consumer behavior is wacky. I mean, people, all kinds of stuff, how we go to restaurants. I was at a restaurant recently, had to wait an hour for a table and an hour for my food. And then you're probably asking, why did you even stay? Well, after like 45 minutes ago, okay, it just went from this is dinner to this is a cultural experiment. Like, what is going on here? This is fascinating. So I asked the waitress, hey, what's going on? She's like, well, we're all new. I go, what do you mean we're all new? Yeah, all the people, when the restaurant had to close for the pandemic, they didn't come back. So we're all new and we're all figuring it out. I was like, okay, but why is the wait for the food? She goes, oh, because The kitchen was staffed for only in-restaurant diners, and now 60% of their preparation is for people ordering to go or for delivery. So their business is like in shock and awe, and they're really new people, new customer behavior. And so all that's playing out. And so this is really hard for businesses. You know, I hear a lot of employees, my leaders don't know what they're doing. They're tone deaf. They're telling us all to get back. Well, there are so many new problems that they're trying to figure out right now that, and not to excuse it, but let's understand that we are still in trying to make it through. One organization 2 weeks ago did something really radical, and I have no idea if this is like going to hold up, and time is only going to, we'll only know over time how much of this stuff's going to stick or not. Yeah. But what Canva did, Canva is an Australian based software platform for digital creativity. I'm sort of overgeneralizing here, and they just closed a round of financing to realize a valuation of like $40 billion. They're hiring like crazy, and they just announced to their employees, we're going to, in answering questions like, hey, are we going to the office? What's happening here? Canva said, we're going to let every team decide what they want to do. Decentralizing to the ground floor of their organization. Every team, you guys figure out what you want to do. And we're only going to ask and require that you be in the office a minimum of 8 days a year, which just made me like, when I heard that, I just started busting out like, who determined like 8, not 7 or not 9? Like, oh, is it, someone said, well, it's 2 a quarter. I'm like, yeah, but what does that mean? So we know you're alive. So like, what, you have to show up. We just know that you exist and you're not a fictional employee that we're paying. But that is really got people going, whoa, because everyone's saying, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing? And what are you doing? And that feels uncomfortable. And Mike, to sort of answer your question, like, what am I seeing that organizations are trying to do relative to this new, how should we organize and get back to, creating value, is the best practice today is experimentation. It truly is. We don't know. People ask me, and I'm an outsider, hey, what should we do here? And I was asked this by a company that had like 250,000 employees. Really, Steve, tell us what's the best practice that you're seeing in all your clients? I said, the best practice is going to feel really unsatisfying when I tell you, but it's experiment. You've got factories, they need to be in there. Are they feeling safe? What communication mechanisms do you have in place that they feel assured that you're doing everything they can for their safety? Because it's not just their at-work safety, it's their safety of their families now, because they're bringing home stuff from the office. And this is just another fundamentally crazy point of, we have never, as leaders of people, had to consider someone's self, definition of safety before in engaging with them as an employee. It was never, so now we're seeing people like, yeah, no, I'm not coming to that meeting with 25 people in the office. Not doing that. I've got a wife who's immunocompromised or a kid or whatever, not doing that. That was never part of the calculus of engaging with another coworker or an employee. And now it is.
Well, all the dependents, right? It's you got everybody else to worry about, and it's not about us anymore. It's about everyone. So
That's
it's
right.
a little bit of a community, a bigger sense of community.
And that, Mike, but hang on, Mike, let's pause on this one, because this is where I get to reasons to feel optimistic and reasons to be excited. You're right. We've got to be mindful. And isn't it great that we're more mindful of the greater community of the people that we work with? We know more about each other, the backgrounds of the drum set of the guy who's on the Zoom right now. Like, hey, what's that all about? So, and you want to know. Now you're curious, like, what's that all about? And I'll say, well, I was in a band in high school and I like to hit the drums really hard. And I've got a basement here, but it's still pretty loud. And now you've got a window that you wouldn't have had. And so one of the big concerns many people have, myself included, is how are we replacing those informal collision moments with our coworkers where an idea got passed that there was no, planned agenda for? There was no formal structure around that. And I would say, well, we are now seeing stuff and understanding and having to be more aware of the lives of our coworkers, not just the performance on the job. And I hope that's something that we can leverage in the future, right? I really do,
Yeah, no, it's a great point. We're getting a sense of people's lives. We're literally in their homes every day. But I will say with those intersections in terms of the meetings and different spots in the office, I think that today more than ever you have to be much more intentional in getting into people's homes. So you have to make sure you are calling and touching and connecting with people on a regular basis, because it never happened, right? It's when you
Right.
just went to get a coffee in the office, you ran into people, but now you have to be like, oh, I need to connect with so-and-so so I can actually catch up.
That's right. And do that as much as you can. Be intentional about that, but also be intentional about informal connections, not just,
Yeah.
hey, let's just be all business. And I think that's one of the things that I learned with a lot of my clients is I first start with, how are you?
Yeah.
How are you doing? And that's sort of my nature anyway. I'm sort of a Myers-Briggs ENFP. I need high context when I get to deal with people. And I know you, Mike, and I know you're kind of the same way.
Yeah.
And so that's really, so it's a natural for me, but it's not for a lot of people. And the other really interesting thing about the pandemic is you would think that this is an introvert's dream come true. And what the data is showing us is it's not. The introverts are missing a sense of community, a sense of predictability. A lot of introverts, yeah, maybe they don't like all the, large group gatherings, but they do like consistency and patterns to a certain extent, which is just another super interesting dimension of this whole, ocean where the undertows are, more variable than at any time.
That was a massive learning for myself, where it's like, oh, I actually miss people, and I'm in the people business. So certainly a good point. But we talked about the fact that retention and hiring is a massive challenge for a lot of people with this, the coin term of great resignation. But one of the things that we've done at Robert Half is we actually ran another survey that showed that 1 in 3 professionals currently working from home would look for a new job if they were required to return back to the office on a full-time basis. So we're finding a massive disconnect, and I'm not sure if you're seeing this a lot, where what employees want and what employers may be offering down the line, even post-pandemic, is not aligning. Why is there such a disconnect? Why are employers maybe not flexing in different circumstances to give that flexibility of a hybrid world when they know it may have worked over the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, let's step back, and I'm going to take two directions on answering that question. So it's like, why are employees thinking like that? Number one, and why are employers in many cases struggling to recognize it, understand it, accept it? Because the people who are making these decisions are the same people that you surveyed, right? The people who are making decisions get back to work, I think, is that same 33%, right? I've seen as high as 45%. You tell me I got to go back in there, I'd rather look for another job and rather quit. And I probably will then do that. And I think what we're hearing in that data, and also let's throw another survey. Gallup came out recently and said during the pandemic, they've seen rising engagement. Okay. So let me translate that. Wait a second. You mean to tell me the less time people are actually in their companies, the more engaged they are? Yeah. Well, I think we don't really know what's driving that yet, but I would suggest the greater freedom and autonomy and independence is something that people are really reluctant to want to give up. And so simple, like the work and life just was taken over by the pandemic. It was a hostile takeover. They merged together. And so now I got to figure out education at home. I got to figure out different methods of getting groceries and supplies. And apparently toilet paper was like a hot commodity for a period of time, and all kinds of different stuff. But I got to figure that out. And I learned I can go to the grocery store at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I don't have to jockey with people on Saturday and Sunday. And I don't want to go back to that. I love that because it's a better experience. I don't have to negotiate or try to blackmail my hairstylist to get on her calendar for Saturday. I can do it any day of the week. And so that's what's driving this. Back to the point I made earlier, everyone's looking at their lives differently, and that freedom is something people don't want to give up. And it's so important to them. And I also think, particularly in North America, people are starting to realize, like, I don't need all that stuff that I thought I did need. Like, I don't need to have all these things because we had to live in a much more simple, more enclosed reality. Like think about like club memberships or gym memberships. Oh, they're closed. Am I really that worse off? No. And so, maybe some people are saying, yeah, definitely, but whatever. So then organizations, why are they struggling to get it? Even though the people who are making these decisions are part of that same 33% of your survey. Like, how is that possible? And I think it's because of what I mentioned earlier. Business leaders are tasked with achieving outcomes, and they're not sure yet they can do that in some sort of remote hybrid fashion. And so we've got fear that's driving that. I know how to deliver. I know I can create value if we're all together. And if we don't, I lose my job. Investors don't invest in us. Our share price goes down. There's a lot on the line. And so it's not a simple, hey, why don't we just do it? Yeah, because they could lose their job if it doesn't work. Right. And so I think we need to appreciate that. And so what I would say to all of you, like, this is crazy, how come they don't do it? Is like, show them you've been more productive. Show them the company can create greater value. Show them they have a greater pool of talent they can acquire and hire if they're able to get comfortable managing remotely. I mean, at a minimum, I really hope we finish this pandemic and say, wow, our collective recognition that we can manage people remotely just went up significantly. And the good news for us is we can now hire people anywhere in the world. That's pretty awesome, right? And that's pretty great. Now you got to still deal with time differences and the taxation of that and maybe cultural differences too. But I think there's as much upside as downside, but some businesses, let's take investment banking. They're like, get back in the office. We're like, why? All of the work is I'm just sitting at my cube there, not talking to anyone. Well, we've got data security issues. We've got data privacy issues. We don't know that when you tunnel in from the VPN at your home that we can protect the trillions of dollars. So you got to get here until we know how to do that, right? So there are other reasons other than, hey, how come you're a tone deaf leader and you don't let me work from home? There's a lot of other, concerns that I think are coming into play, and we're still working through it. We're still learning, and there's a lot more for us to figure out.
So, what would you say for, especially when you tie in culture and you tie in leadership and that evolution, how do you drive that positive culture and cultivate that culture within your team when some people want to be in the office, some people want to be here, some people are in Hawaii? How do you gather people without them all being in that one room?
What you're talking about, Mike, is just how do we get, rephrasing what you're saying is, how do we get more comfortable with the new paradigm of engagement and with our people? How do we get comfortable? That's really what the big challenge is here right now. Of course, we can create greater connection and greater sense of community in different ways. We just aren't comfortable that we can do it consistently yet, right? So what I would say is, suspend your belief that the only way and the right way is the old way. You're going to have to suspend your belief, because if you do, I believe your opportunity to be better on the other side, to be able to recruit better people, is going to improve significantly. And that's just a part of it, Mike. And we haven't gone into this domain, but I'm going to throw it out there because there's still some open spots on the wall of stuff, and maybe this is going to stick. But if your business is struggling to recruit, one of the things I would ask you to ask yourself is our model of belief based on only a full-time employee that works for me is how I can create value? Is that the only way? Because I would suggest there are dozens of ways you can create value if you think outside of, I have to have a full-time employee that's dedicated to me. And a lot of top talent right now, and we don't have a measure for this yet, there is no data, a lot of top talent, I believe, is in the driver's seat and saying, I want to be my own boss. I'm going to go to Fiverr, Upwork, other platforms, Robert Half, and have them be my agent and give me interim assignments, because I want to control who I work for and when I work and how I work. And so there's a whole pool of people there ready to rock and roll. And people are saying, yeah, but Steve, isn't that going to be like a cultural mess? We have all these mercenary contractors in here running around that really committed to our culture. And to that, my response is, well, what kind of culture is it when you can't recruit and all the people you do have are working 3 times as hard and asking for more money and feeling unappreciated? What kind of culture is that? Like, we have to be more creative with our talent portfolio. We just have to. And, there's a lot of models out there, like the Hollywood model, we hire by project. There's W.L. Gordon Associates and 3M. They have a gig model within their enterprise where people bid on projects within that. There's different ways of doing this. And I think there's huge pools of talent. And this is another side of this piece, which I think is really worthy of saying. It's like, if I'm struggling to hire full-time people, that's really not what I need to solve. What I need to solve is create a product of value in the marketplace. And I've assumed a full-time employee is my only pathway to that. And now that I can't hire those people, it's on me to be more creative with that. This is our moment, right? And this is what I say in Workquake. We have the greatest moment of our lifetime to think differently. And we're our only obstacle to being able to achieve that. Our models of I have to have a full-time worker, and it's perpetuated by finance because it's all FTE, full-time exempt employees, is how we budget and how we forecast and how we think of how we do it. We're going to have to build some new models here. If you want to thrive and survive, you're going to have to adapt your model. And so that's where my head's at right now around, don't tell me you've got a recruiting problem, because when you do, what I'm hearing is you have a failure to be creative problem. That's the problem right now.
You're making me feel bad, Steve.
But I mean, we're all there, and it's easy for me to say, Mike, because I'm not in a daily operator role, but I am starting to see people realize there's more platforms and there's more organizations. I mean, you're playing both sides of this game at Robert Half. We've got the full-time placement, we got the interim placement, and so you want organizations to win, and you want them to have access to the right talent, right? Sure. And you also want to advocate for the great talent that you have to find good environments and good fits. So, I mean, that's why I'm so interested, when we were talking off air, like, what are you seeing? What's going on? Who's struggling, who's not? No,
it's pretty awesome. Quick question from the Q&A here, Steve. I think Farzan had a question out of Toronto. The question is, in your opinion, what is Workquake, and what does it relate in the office environment, or how does it relate maybe in the office environment?
Gosh, I mean, I guess how would I capture this beyond what we've already discussed? I believe that workers are thinking about careers differently today. And that is a huge Workquake. I think what people want is different. And let me throw out another provocative thought. I believe talent today, generally, I'm going to say knowledge workers believe that job security is movement, not being stationary. And the more I move, the more I learn, the more I grow, the more I get challenged with new assignments, the more my network grows, the more people I meet. I'm increasingly seeing that that's what they're translating. They're not remorseful leaving somewhere early, and it's not disloyal. They're loyal to their learning. They're not loyal to a company today. And that, I know, if you've got a model that says, well, that's sort of like poor ethics, I'm like, yeah, maybe, but that's what we're seeing. And that's what the data is showing. So I'm trying to say with Workquake, like, wake up. There's new trends. And I think we need to really recognize the psychology of the workforce is changing, and nobody believes that people are going to stay in jobs longer. So let's build a new model that expects that to happen, right? And one of the models, Farzan, that I'll throw out there is management consulting. Okay, so if we take a look at the Ernst & Youngs, the PwCs, the Accentures, the Bains, the Boston Consulting Group, the McKinseys, they've built an employment model that goes like this. Please come to my company and then please leave. And in fact, the better the job you get, the better I can recruit new grads to replace you, because I showed that I recruited you out of school. I grew you, you got a better job somewhere else. And now I can use you as a model to recruit more people. And by the way, as a consulting firm, I make more money when I have younger talent right out of school, because the longer you stay, the less of a margin I get when I build a client. So the profit is greater with more fluidity. The value of you getting a better job makes me more valuable for recruiting younger talent. And that's a really interesting business model. It's out there today. And so, is it for every position in the consulting firm? No, it's not for every single one, but for the majority of their consultants, that's how it works. And so I would say to organizations, hey, take a look over there. I know you can't do this in every job, in every business, in every industry, but if you're like a Spotify, for example, in Sweden, they instituted a practice recently where they said you cannot be in your job more than 2 years. Now, they don't want people to leave the company, but what they're addressing is single points of failure. So how many of you listening today have had people leave and you go, oh no, Grace and Hannah are the only people that know how to do that system they built and they just left? Well, that's your fault because no one else learned how to do Grace and Hannah's job. So in a world where we know people are going to leave, moving people around diminishes that single point of failure, right? And I know people are like, no, but Steve, we need the continuity. Yes, we do. But keep in mind, Spotify's business is changing quickly and they have work that other people can learn to do. If you've got deep expertise and deep specialization, I know it's going to be harder to do that. And it may not be possible. Like the CFO is not going to go rotate into, user experience design for 2 years. Not going to happen. But for a lot of that organization, they can do it. And I think that's a pretty interesting model, playing out. And just, for the sake of example, so we're not talking hypothetical with this stuff. But yeah, it was a good question.
It's fair. Looks like we're over time, so I'm going to wrap things up. Before we do, I want to give everybody a heads up that we're actually going to be giving away 3 copies of Steve's book to random attendees. So we're going to pick 3 from people that joined us today, and we'll email you individually to get your addresses and get you your copy. Steve, for anybody that is looking for the book, where can they pick up a copy? Amazon?
Yeah, anywhere books are sold. You can go to my publisher, Amplify. You can go to stevecadigan.com, my website, and we'll direct you. But anywhere, you go to your bookstore and say, can you pick up a copy of Workquake and order maybe 100 for the local community just to benefit. But Mike, I just want to say, I'm sorry we went over. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy, busy days. I hope this has been helpful. If you want to find me, I hear LinkedIn's a pretty good site. You're welcome to reach out to me. And Mike, thank you for the work that you're doing and the opportunity to be able to share some of those insights with you today.
Appreciate you, and appreciate everybody else joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful remainder of the week. Thanks everybody.
Take care.